The month of June was a good one for this Pittsburgh Pirates team in most ways. We're going to talk about what went right, what went wrong, and so much more as we recap the month of June on today's episode of Locked On Pirates.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every single day. A little bit later than usual on Mondays, but that's fine. You're still getting your show today, everybody, here on the Locked On Pirates podcast. My name is Ethan Smith, bringing you your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates every Monday through Friday on this wonderful network that we call Locked On. That is my good friend Gary Morgan from the Pirates Fan Forum, also the basically runner of Steel City Pirates, where a lot of my writing work is, and the topic of a lot of stuff we're actually going to talk about today with 5 Up, 5 Down. And while we're recording this, probably his 5 thoughts at 5 that you can also read after you listen to this or before, whatever suits your fancy on this wonderful Monday. Wait, what month is it again? July already, Gary? Jesus. Like, the season started like yesterday, and now we're 3 months into it and have learned a lot already.
Yeah, 5 thoughts is going to be late today, but, you know, it's still going to come out on Monday. I haven't missed one yet. I don't plan on missing one, but it's going to be late.
We're all about continuity here on the Locked On Pirates podcast today. It will be done no matter what. What's the old adage? The show goes on. That's kind of the adage that me and Gary are on today on Monday. Sure. Speaking of, I did mention that it is July, which means we are now another full month out of the season. We have seen April. We did a recap on that. We have seen May. We did a recap on that. And we have now seen June go by this team, and it was a good month for this team. It may not have felt like it at times. We'll get into that later in the show about the good and the bad and why their efforts are going to be good. And then we're obviously going to take a look forward to July as well, because July has the potential to be a chaotic month for this team, or it could just be a normal month. It really just depends on how they decide to operate. Really, I want to start with your biggest takeaway that we saw from the past 30 days, because it was a month that I'll go ahead and mention. It was the first month that the Pirates had a winning record this year that did not include March. March, they did obviously win all 4 games in that month, but we're not going to really include that in this conversation. So they went 14-12. So what was your biggest takeaway from what we saw over the past 30 days?
I guess the positions of need really took center stage for me and clarified. I mean, catcher is a deep dark hole unless Henry figures it out, and he's really the only internal hope that it's not that. You know, so I mean, you're kind of hoping for him. The concussion took some steam out of whatever was going on there as far as his comeback goes, and he's still struggling with it apparently. So I mean, he's been shut down again from his rehab, so who knows how far we'll get into this month or what they'll have to do. But if you want any offense out of catcher, what I learned is Henry is the only guy it could come from, and he probably looks less capable of delivering it than almost anyone else on the planet right now. Rowdy Tellez probably made first base okay. Between he and Connor Joe, I think that's a pretty good tandem. And they'll go back to what they originally intended this season with Rowdy and Joe as far as their split of time, and I think we'll see better results. And if he slips, it'll become a position of need again. But I think they're probably going to get away with him sticking, and the rotation is still the story, man.
Yeah.
It really is.
I don't see any other way that you can't talk about this rotation. And in that 5 Up, 5 Down piece, I kind of like spoiler alert that obviously Paul Skeens was playing up in that piece. And I even said it to myself. I said, what can I say about Paul Skeens in this little short excerpt that nobody else has ever really heard? And it's very difficult because, I mean, you can throw the stats all over the place. You can do all of that. Really, in May, when Paul Skeens came up, he dazzled. He looked great. He really did. And I don't think anybody really expected that he could get better in such a short time, but he did in June. I mean, just on the surface, you're looking at a guy whose ERA in May dropped from a 2.45 to a 1.78. He had 40 strikeouts and 5 walks over the past month. Just an absolutely phenomenal month for him again. And it's funny because with Skeens in the room and Skeens doing everything he's doing, Mitch Keller could very well make an all-star game again. And it's like not even really that much of a talked about topic as far as things are concerned. We've seen some hiccups from Jared Jones, but I think you expect that in a rookie season. And Bailey Falter, albeit I had to put him in the down category in that piece, has still been a very good surprise for this team and still been somebody that they've, to be fair, have had to rely on quite a bit with Martin Perez being out and Marco Gonzalez and Quinn Priester and the other issues they've had. So really, I don't think the question moving forward at this point is really the rotation. So that's the good. We've kind of outlined that already. And obviously you have Brian Reynolds. You have some other guys that are doing very good things. The bad, I think, is where you have to focus on now, especially with the trade deadline season pretty much here. I mean, things are going to start shaping up. You're going to start hearing the rumor mill go crazy. You're going to start seeing all these names be thrown around. Like I already saw Garrett Crochet thrown around in a mock trade, and that it's not going to happen because they have no reason to make it happen because much like Jones and Skeens, Gary, and you know this, he's a guy that you're going to have to monitor his innings too. So why do you need another guy like that in your roster? You just don't. So when you're looking at the bad, you already outlined some of it, catcher. You look at the outfield, it could probably use some help. What do you think is going to potentially be a solution to this?
That's a big question.
Yeah.
What do I think is going to potentially be a solution to it? I think this next little stretch of games here leading up to the All-Star break is probably going to tell us. I mean, I wrote a piece last week which is basically just looking at the bottom of the league and what I thought was actually available. I talked on the 412 Double Play podcast the other day about how concerned I am about what's actually there in my own show. I don't know that all these selling teams are really selling teams. I don't think the A's are. I'm not confident in that at all. And I think the Sox really could go one of two different ways, and they've got a lot of talent coming, so they may not feel compelled to move these guys either. I don't know. We'll see how it plays out. I think this next little stretch of games, if they go above 500 in that, and I don't see any reason why they wouldn't go out and add. I think they probably would. And they're only going to subtract so much. I think there's only about 4 players that you would even consider trading off this team, and you'd have to be pretty awfully bad to do so. So, I mean, find things on the trade market. That's really what there is, and it's slim pickings, so get out there as soon as you can.
Which I find interesting, too, because we talk about the trade market and looking forward to July and all the things that it can build to. And it's interesting because a lot of times during the trade deadline, you have these moves that you don't really expect. Like there's going to be a couple of names out there from teams that might even be in it, quote unquote, that you see some of these guys move on. And a lot of people, to highlight some of the players Gary was talking about as subtractions, Aroldis Chapman could be one of those. He very well could be. He's on a 1-year deal. He could move somewhere. You could see a guy like who's another, Michael A. Taylor could be a guy that a team might say, we want a defensive outfielder as a backup. You could see that very well happen. And those don't mean that the Pirates are going to be a worse team in favor of trading those guys away. It's just more of utilizing it. That's the same reason they traded Carlos Santana last year. It's the same reason they traded Jose Quintana, Tyler Anderson, Rich Hill, and G-Man Choi in the past. It's a thing that we've seen. And I've even said that publicly on Twitter a couple of times that I think this is a team, Gary, that's going to subtract and add. I think you're going to see kind of a mixture of it.
I think it could work out that way. But I mean, I think it's funny because this is point 1 in 5 thoughts. It's like the only part of it that's actually written. It's literally talking about who I think are rentals that could get moved even while they're still trying to add. I have a short list, man. It's Rowdy. And for Rowdy, I think you'd have to either have acquired somebody that you feel is better, specifically a left-hander, or you better have plans to, because right now he's adding something to this lineup. So You're not moving him for anything. And even if you're kind of slipping out of it, you're not going to do that. And he doesn't barely make anything. Michael A. Taylor, I might want to get rid of one way or another. Like if somebody offered me a bag of balls, I'd take it for Michael A. Taylor just to get him off my roster. Ryan Baracki, you know, you wouldn't want to, but he's been injured all year, and you know, there could be a market for him. And again, expiring contract, and you've gotten this far without him, you know. Aroldis Chapman, like you said, is another guy. Yasmani Grandal, if he holds up and doesn't get hurt, eventually you're going to want to get Henry back up here. That's kind of how that's going to have to happen. And Marco Gonzalez, if he gets healthy, you could have him and Martin Perez both potentially available in moves, but none of them would be a white flag.
No,
all of them would be.
Yeah, like if you trade all of those guys, then you're looking around and you're saying, okay, what are we doing here? But that's obviously something we'll be thinking about throughout the next couple of weeks, especially with the games that you mentioned on the horizon before the All-Star break. So how can the Pirates build upon their efforts in June as they enter July? We'll discuss in a moment. Today's episode of Locked On Pirates is brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code Locked On MLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Because Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. And unlike other apps on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. If you're looking for promotions, Prize Picks has got you covered every week. From lowering select players' stats projections on Tuesdays to helping your lineup hit or getting your entry fees back if you have a losing lineup on Fridays. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks for a deposit match up to $100. Just pick more, pick less. It's that easy with Prize Picks. Today's episode is also brought to you by Tax Network USA. Visit tnusa.com/lockedon or call 1-800-549-1000 because here on Locked On Pirates, we pride ourselves on getting you the latest news for your team, whether it's the offseason, the draft, spring training, or the playoffs. It's year-round. And collection season is also year-round because tax season is over doesn't mean the IRS will stop coming after you for unfiled taxes. The IRS can garner your wages, levy your bank accounts, and even seize your property. So don't let the IRS target you. Let the licensed professionals and tax experts at Tax Network USA go to bat for you. They have saved their clients over $1 billion in tax debt. So whether you owe taxes, have complicated matters that require tax planning, or finally hit that parlay this season and need help correctly filing, call 1-800-549-1000 or visit taxnetworkusa.com/lockedon. And be sure to mention Locked On Pirates at checkout and you'll receive a $250 discount off of all the services that Tax Network USA has to offer. And thank you to Tax Network USA and Prize Picks for being wonderful sponsors of the Locked On Pirates podcast and the Locked On Podcast Network. Make sure you check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast here on Amazon Fire TV and YouTube. It's the 24/7 streaming channel of Locked On that brings you your source for all the sports news you need, especially with NHL and NBA free agency going absolutely bonkers right now. Make sure you also listen to Locked On Clippers. I'm going to plug him because I love him and love that show. Lots going on for my favorite team right now, and another jersey that I'm just going to have to store in the closet because I need to stop buying basketball jerseys at this point. Anyways, we moved to July. Happy Independence Week with July 4th coming up. I know me living in Savannah, it used to be fireworks for the entire week. People in Pennsylvania seem to be a little more tame on that idea. So I appreciate it that I can actually sleep on a daily basis. And the Pittsburgh Pirates, as we've mentioned, and I mentioned it a lot, 3 games out of the wild card, still very much in this thing. very much in it. And these next couple of weeks that we're going to see where they play, obviously, St. Louis, Milwaukee, and New York, not in that order, but that's just how I said it. These are big series. Now, obviously, Milwaukee kind of running away with this NL Central a little bit. There's been a lot of chatter from people that I talk to that expect them to come down eventually. I don't know if it's going to happen. I mean, I really don't. I don't know if Milwaukee's ever going to come back down from where they are. St. Louis very much in reach right now. The Mets, of course, very much in reach right now. It's going to be an interesting lead up to All-Star weekend or All-Star break, not weekend anymore. I forgot it's not a weekend. So really, how do they build on what we saw in June, Gary? I mean, this is a team that, albeit there were some wrongs and some bad things we saw, they still left the month as a plus 500 team. So what do you think they can build on going into this important stretch?
I mean, it's beautiful, man. Right out the gate, they get an instant shot to just upturn the apple cart on the Cardinals.
Yep.
I mean, the Cardinals are exactly 3 games better than the Pirates. Take it. I mean, beat them. You know, get those 3 wins and tie it up. You know, I mean, that's what you need to do. Go out and beat these teams. You got the Mets right after that. They're ahead of you too. Take them to town. The destiny is in their hands, man. Like that's why I say, like, you know, people want to make it about the GM. To me, the time to be mad about what the GM has put together as a roster was in the preseason.
Yes.
Right now, the trades just aren't there yet. I'm sorry. They will be in a couple weeks. So it's on the team he assembled at that time to get them in position to be there. I mean, somehow for under 90 million, this is where they are. The Cubs are spending 230 million and they're in last place.
Yeah.
I mean,
it has been
they spent $8 million on a coach.
Yeah, it's been a weird year. I even said that in our group chat yesterday. I said, what is going on with Chicago? And really, even if you take 2 out of 3 in the next 2 series, Milwaukee, leave that alone for a second and we'll pin that one. 2 out of 3 against both of these teams, I think, is a must. I really do. And I don't call must wins all that much. But if you go into this stretch and you win,
the Mets are a 4-game series that wraps around the weekend. So,
oh yeah, that is correct. I forgot that they have that weird Monday game. I've never really seen that where they go Friday to Monday. I thought that was interesting because usually it's Thursday to Sunday. Completely different conversation.
I don't know about you, man, but I'm heading down to the McDonald's here as soon as we're done talking to go kick Grimace in the seeds.
Yes,
I'm not dealing with it.
Yeah, I'm probably on Saturday when I go going to bring my Burger King crown so I can just completely just deviate from it. But either way, if you can find a way to win these series, 3 of 4 and 2 of 3, I think that's a must. And a lot of people would say, well, it's still June. They have time. Do they? I mean, I know that you have that crowd that preaches they need to stop being so patient, or you have the crowd that says they need to be patient. Well, now it's kind of put up or shut up time, as you said. I mean, this team has it in their hands. There are 7 games in front of them that they can look at and say, if we win 5 of those 7 games, we are in a very good spot. It's something they can do and that they are fully capable of doing. And they're also a team that could easily lose 5 of these next 7 games. That's just the type of team they are. And really, that's going to shape how things move forward based really on how these next 7 to 13 games go.
I'd say the best way to look at the team right now is no matter what is going to happen at the deadline, whether they add or subtract or whatever, there will be no blowing up of the team. They're not going to trade anybody that would shock you. You know, I don't think they're going to go out and get any of the tier A guys first. I don't like any of the tier A guys that are out there right now. No. And I don't necessarily think that just because you need something, I think it's just like the draft. You almost can't trade for need. Like the best player out there is a center fielder, but he's an idiot and isn't really as good as people have claimed he is for years. I'm not doing it. You know, the other one, they want like 75% of your farm system for a guy that plays 25% of the games. I don't know. So let's see what the shopping list really looks like before we get there. And yeah, it's on this team, man. I love that aspect of it. I want to see these guys come together and prove to me that they want added to. That's what a GM should want too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Ben Sherrington's going to be looking at this next stretch and saying, hey, this is the team that I've built, and hope that team can build around itself together. Do you remember the old game show Baggage? That's what I kind of think a lot of this free agent group is. A lot of this, or this trade market group is. You look around and the name sounds nice, and then you realize you open the briefcase and there's something really wrong. I think that's how you can really think about it right now. And there's a lot of teams thinking about that right now. So overall, I'm going to ask Gary a question. Chaos or normalcy as we move into this trade deadline season and the month of July in just a moment? Today's episode of Locked On Pirates is brought to you by FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn right now, because this summer FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus on a daily basis. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long, because FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. If you want to bet on Brian Reynolds to keep continuing tearing the cover off the baseball, or you think O'Neal Cruz can launch one into the Allegheny River, head over to FanDuel.com/LockedOn and start making the most of your summer, because FanDuel is an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball and, of course, an official sponsor of the Locked On Podcast Network. Alrighty, everybody, and welcome back to the final part of today's episode of Locked On Pirates here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every day, and a simple 3-word question that is not actually so simple at all. Really, this is an interesting season. Probably the most interesting that I've covered in my 4 years now of Locked On, and this being the third or fourth season that I'm covering. And I mean that in terms of just not even just the Pirates. I'm talking about everything. This is a very weird season, because for somebody that may not know that's listening to this show, folks, I'm going to tell you right now that there's about 5 teams that are really out of it right now. That is the Angels, the Athletics, the White Sox, the Marlins, and Colorado. Also, the Texas Rangers, who won the World Series last year, are 38-46, and Milwaukee has nearly the same record as the Los Angeles Dodgers. And the Washington Nationals are 4 games out of a wild card spot. If that doesn't spew stuff that you didn't know, then I don't know what to tell you. Even the Cleveland Guardians, folks, are a wagon right now. That is how things are going. And to go back to the first point, we always mention right now that this trade market, and you could spew all the names you want, say all the names you want, folks. You could say it all, preach it to the mountaintop. Go to Mount Washington and go on the incline and preach Vladimir Guerrero Jr., right? Preach Luis Robert. Preach whoever. Gary, I'm going to ask a simple question. Is this going to be a chaotic month or a normal month relatively, with all of the things that are going to be meshed in between it, like games and the All-Star break and trade deadline and all that stuff? Chaos or normalcy?
I'm going to say normalcy. I don't think there's anybody big enough to really set the baseball world ablaze that's going to be available. There's no Juan Soto this year. I do think like the 2 center fielders will go. I think somebody will take Jazz Chisholm, and somebody will really push hard to get Robert. I'm not convinced that Chicago wants to really move him, like I said, but I think he'll be on the block, and there'll be a bidding war for he and Jazz. And I think the loser will probably take Jazz. The winner will get, if you want to go that route. But the Yankees, they don't want Judge playing center field.
No.
So you figure that they got to be in the market for a center fielder, right? And there's no way the Braves that we just watched dominate the Pirates are going to leave their outfield the way it is. They have to have some kind of replacement for Acuna. So I just think they're going to do something there. I really do. Those 2 teams are pretty standard. The Dodgers have pretty standard needs. They're not going to need any starting pitching. In fact, they might be able to deal some starting pitching, like professional major league starting pitching.
Yeah.
They have so much coming back. They might be able to deal some of that for anything they want. That might be something that could be pretty attractive to a team like the White Sox, who maybe don't think they're super, super far away. Maybe they'll take a stab at somebody else that the Dodgers can't use. Maybe it gives a team like the Pirates an opportunity to sneak in and get like James Outman or something, somebody they're not using that's had some power in this league. That talk about guys that are potentially blocked. That's a guy that's potentially blocked. You might be able to use him here effectively. Turns into Verdugo.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting as well because we mentioned this stretch. Another name that's been thrown out there is Pete Alonso. I mean, Pete Alonso is a guy that's been thrown around. He's going to be a free agent. He's a Boris client. All the stuff that comes with that. Pirates go in and beat the Mets 3 out of 4, and the Mets suddenly fall from where they are to fall like farther down the table. I mean, I'd even argue that even if they're in it, you might still see them do it because I don't know if they can truly think that they get them back. And these are just all the dominoes that are going to fall. That's why I love when I hear people say, oh, the MLB trade deadline isn't as interesting as the NBA trade deadline or blah, blah, whatever. You hear that like argument about how the different sports trade deadlines are all like different and more exciting. Really, baseball's so fun because so many dominoes just can fall after the result of 3 games at this time of the year.
I think it resembles the NHL deadline a heck of a lot more than I would have thought years ago.
Yeah.
There's usually 1 or 2 big fish. There's 1 or 2 teams that tend to go shopping for big fish. We have always watched one here in Pittsburgh for years and years.
Yeah.
Now, not any longer, but for a while there, any big name that came on the market, of course the Penguins were in on it. Salary cap be damned, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's what MLB's created with this extra wild card, and there is something we have always wanted in this league: parity. It's very, very top heavy parity. There are some real super teams out there. The talent's not spread out evenly throughout the league from top to bottom, but you have a real healthy middle class right now.
Yeah.
So that whole middle class, the problem is they're all living in the same cul-de-sac fighting over which one of them's going to get the actual corner house.
Yeah.
So, I mean, right now I could argue in the National League, everything we're talking about, there's really only one wild card spot open. So all those teams that are in it are fighting for one spot. They're not, it's kind of silly.
Yeah, and I mean, on top of all this too, you consider that I really think the push too that's helped the trade deadline, and a lot of Pirates fans even think this, is you look at the last couple of years of the teams that went to the World Series, even in the National League specifically, were that final wild card team. The Diamondbacks snuck in there last year. They were a surprise team that nobody really expected to get there. Next thing you know, they beat the Dodgers. They go on to beat the Phillies, and then they're playing the Rangers in the World Series. The Phillies the year prior did the exact same thing against the Houston Astros. They got there and they played very well. And I think that from St. Louis, I'd even still say down to Chicago. Chicago's just so weird, and I don't expect them to stay that bad that long. And if you want kind of pseudo proof of that, go listen to Jeff Carr and Gary's version of Pirates Fan Forum where they drafted players from the NL Central, and it seemed like it was just drafting Cubs players. I don't think they're going to be that bad. And it's going to be all these teams, as you mentioned, really fighting for one spot, because Atlanta is going to be a wild card team. San Diego more than likely is going to be a wild card team. So you're really seeing 7 to 8 teams right now just go for one spot. And that makes everything that happens in this time very precious. And that's where I agree with you a little bit about the normalcy, because I don't think teams are going to really want to make that crazy splash move when they could easily miss the playoffs just as easily as they can make it.
And that's the deep, dark secret too. The teams that are out of it, like the Marlins, don't have a lot to move.
No,
they don't have a lot to move. They really don't. Most of what they have that's really elite that would get them something is hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Colorado Rockies, you never know. That owner just does what's fun for him. The Cubs are just coming out of a rebuild and have a bunch of kids. They're not selling off.
No.
Like they'll sell some pieces here and there, but they're not selling off. The Reds are coming out of it. They're not selling off. You know, who are they going to trade? Friedel and Fraley? Maybe. Yeah. Nationals coming out of a rebuild, just calling up their top prospect. You're not getting much out of them either. Pirates, same boat. We just talked about how little they had. Giants, pretty young. They got some vets they could move. Diamondbacks are still in it. They're not doing anything, even if they fall out. They're young. The Mets, I bet they'd love to sell.
they would. They are a team that I think is like I think Steve Cohen is kind of hoping they fall out so he can justify it some more.
Yeah.
Honestly. And then you switch to the American League. I mean, the Rangers aren't going to go crazy on a selling spree. They just made the World Series last year. Right. The Tigers, much like you mentioned, are a team coming out of a rebuild with a lot of young guys. Toronto is interesting because
they're getting to the end of their cycle. Right.
Yeah. And then the Angels, I mean, what do they really have that's super crazy? Oakland. Yeah. Oakland is a weird team because you don't know what they're going to really sell off. And then you mentioned Chicago already earlier about being a team that has some talent on the way. You don't really know what their plan is either. And that's what, like, think about all these things, folks, when you listen to the show that we just did in this segment that we just did. When you're throwing these names out and kind of looking around, thoroughly look at what is available, because I can guarantee you, if you name a player, the Pirates aren't the only team that's looking at that player. I'm serious. They're not. There's probably about 5 or 6 other teams that are probably in the market for that player. And really, at the end of the day, it's up to the guys, like you said earlier. So that's where I think it's a good point to end it. We'll obviously be previewing the Cardinals series tomorrow on this show, taking a look at how the Pirates can find revenge against the St. Louis Cardinals team that they lost to just a few weeks ago. We'll also take a look tomorrow as well at the pitching matchups and everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates, maybe even a little MLB draft preview with that also on the horizon. Gary, you obviously have 5 thoughts at 5 today. What else do you have going on this week?
Well, if I get through 5 thoughts at 5, I got to finish that still. We'll see what tomorrow brings. Tomorrow, probably going to be a pretty quiet day. I'm going to let the baseball talk. But Wednesday and Thursday, I should have a lot of content for you, and Friday even. So
it'll be a good time. And next Monday, folks, it will just be me, just so you guys know, a little programming note. But we'll be back tomorrow. Follow me at MVP_Ethan. Follow Gary at GaryMo2007. Have a wonderful rest of your Monday evening. I'll see you tomorrow. Till then, see you on the flip side.